I'm Sir Evans, and welcome to some real life morning motivation. Because no one wakes up in the morning and says, I hope I have a bad day. My desire is to empower and inspire your daily endeavors, because you can do whatever you set your mind to. The question is, what do you want to do? Whether you're still finding your passion, pursuing it, or living it, motivation is a daily requirement for your success. So here's your morning motivation. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of this Real Life Morning Motivation Podcast. I'm just now starting to get into the little swing of being visual, being in front of you guys. And as always, I'm just appreciative. I'm just appreciative just for the opportunity, just appreciative just to be able to provide something, because I'm really just a middleman. Don't ever get it twisted. I'm just a middleman. But before we get too deep into it, just make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like what you hear. Never want you to subscribe if you don't enjoy. So if you do, just go ahead and help us keep the lights on. But anyways, now that we got that out the way, January almost over, y'all. January is almost done. You have made it through, your first successful 30 days is upon you. It's almost there. It's almost there. So I want to give you a round of applause. If you didn't give yourself a round of applause, I want to give you a round of applause. Congratulations to you. We still got a little bit more ways to go, but we're not going to focus on all that we got to go. All we're going to focus on is this one step more that we got to go, for sure. Just to let you know. I ain't trying to get on no rhyming, but I'm just trying to let it roll. I mean, let's get back into this thing. Put this thing in a figure four like Lot. All right, but anyways, congratulations. And I know over this month we done went a couple different directions, and one of the episodes that just to kind of kick off the new year that I loved and I wanted to kind of tie in another component of it was no elevators. There's no elevators. Now, I don't know if you've discovered that since the last time we chit-chatted, but there's no elevators for success, right? But I'm all about quotes. If you follow my Instagram page, I always drop quotes. There's always quotes on the morning motivation. I'm always down for a good quote. I love them, because I think that quotes kind of help us frame perspectives. They kind of help us to get different perceptions of life. And the thing that I also love about quotes is that they come from so many different nationalities, so many different walks of life. You may hear an African proverb that gives a different perspective from a Chinese proverb. You might hear an American writer or someone in American literature that might drop a quote that's from a lens of, Americana that everybody can relate to. And it just goes on and on. So it's always interesting, even the different walks of life, from a scientist to a Buddhist monk. You never know, but it's always some type of enlightenment in the minds of those who are enlightened that I just love to hear. One of the quotes that always stood out to me, I remember I used to have a poster of it on my wall when I just started, when I first had just graduated high school. Had this poster on my wall. It was a Lao Tzu. And it was about the steps. And I'll actually say it in the morning motivation because it's a part of the message. But that poster did more for me as far as pacing myself at the time. And it was a reminder to take it one day at a time. That was one of the big things that stood out for me, because I would have it on my wall. When I woke up, I would see that poster. And for anybody out there who might feel overwhelmed right now, before I even go any further, I just want you to remember, just take it one day at a time. Don't try to do too much. You can only do so much. So just keep that in mind as the days go on. So, also what I might be helpful to you is this morning motivation. So let's jump dead into it. Another episode, another morning motivation, once again, is provided by you, the listeners, the readers, through the morning motivation text thread. You can subscribe to that by texting Motivate Me to 31996. Once again, text Motivate Me to 31996, and I will add you to the text thread. They come Monday through Fridays, usually between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning there, to just give you a little extra motivation in the morning. And the messages derive from the messages and the motivation. So the podcast topics come from the morning motivations, in which they are the ones that you guys love the most, or they're episodes that you wanted to hear more about it. Explain that more. How did you come to that concept? Let's dive into that. Let's dissect it. Because sometimes a paragraph or two is just not enough to kind of expand on some of the thoughts that we have in those messages. So without any further hesitations or holdups, let's get into today's morning motivation. Lao Tzu was an ancient philosopher and founder of the philosophy Taoism, and considered to be a deity in Chinese religions. Lao is well known for quotes such as, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step." This concept has been such a repeated reminder in my life for every journey that I have taken, because it has all begun with one step. Despite steps being required to reach our destinations, there are still some steps that we must be mindful to avoid, which can lead to setbacks. And when I say steps, it's an acronym. We must be careful to establish these healthy steps in order to be successful. I'm gonna stop right there. Reason I'm gonna stop, because in the morning motivation, I broke them down each day, and I want to kind of dive into them right here. So I created this acronym that kind of helps you to focus on those steps that you're taking. So yes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, but in order to be continuous in taking those steps, we must be mindful of the steps. The STEP acronym is sleeping. Let's start with that one. Sleeping is one of those double-edged swords for me. Like, I have had so many up and down relationships with sleep. I went from not appreciating it to appreciating it to tolerating it. Just so many ups and downs. If you've listened to enough of the episodes, I'm sure you have heard me go on some short rant about some relationship that I had with sleep. But the brain is interesting because two things. One is totally unrelated, but we can tie it in later. The brain needs sleep, and the brain needs carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is a little weird, but the brain feeds off of that. You can't substitute it with fat, protein, fiber. The brain needs carbohydrates, interesting enough. But the brain also needs sleep. The brain is wired for sleep, so much so that after 3 or 4 days without sleep, the mind will literally begin to hallucinate. So one should wonder, like, how can you even be assured that you're even making the right steps if you're not getting enough sleep? Like, if I know that hallucinations is going to set in after a couple days, then that's a little dangerous, even if I'm looking at it from a consistent standpoint of less sleep over a longer period of time. How can you take the most steps if you don't have the strength to even do so? Yeah, the journey of 1,000 miles began with one, but a journey of 1,000 miles requires some sleep, my friend. Like, that wasn't a journey that was taken all the way. Don't get it twisted in what Lao did not say in the quote to assume that it did not exist. Because yes, it started with one step, but there were plenty of opportunities to get some sleep along the way. So let's put some numbers into perspective, right? Because this kind of freaked me out a little bit, but let's do it like this. I used to average, first of all, I used to average about 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Eventually my productivity began to drop after a while. I did this for a while, and after a while, my body just said, no, we can't do this anymore. We won't do this anymore. We gonna strike. And it was at that moment where I never forget, I couldn't stay woke. Like, I literally got up, did about a task or two, fell asleep. I literally had a couch on one side of my apartment. The bed was on the other side, like 500-600 feet. So I had a long hallway. So I would take a nap on the couch. I'm like, okay, let me get up and do something. Get up, walk around, walk over to the bed, boom, and I'm back asleep. Like, it was rough. I say all that to say that even those short periods of sleep begin to catch up with us. You know, they begin to catch up with us over time. So it's really just a matter of time. I personally think that sleep is properly rated by the most successful people in the world, but I think it's overrated by the rest. And when I say the most successful people, I don't always mean the most richest people. I meant what I said. Most successful people. I think that they properly rate sleep. I think that they properly put sleep into its perspective. And I think it's those, I think that there are a lot of unhealthy people who don't get enough rest. Now, if you would have told me this 10 years ago, I would have looked at you like, man, if you don't go and get up out my face talking about some sleep stuff, I sleep when I'm, anybody want to finish the blank? I sleep when I'm dead. Yeah, we've all heard it. Yeah. You might even get some of your gurus that might even pump your head with that too, but we'll get into that in a second. Anyways, so on average, the average person sleeps, the average recommended, first of all, the average recommended hours of sleep is, I think, like 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So, but if you average that out, that makes up to about 30 to 40% of your life that you would have spent sleeping. When I look at the 40% mark, it lightweight kind of bothers me even still to think that I spend almost half of my time sleeping. But when I really think about it, I dive into it a little bit deeper and I say, if I can make the best out of my life at 60%, like 60% of the best of my life, and it requires a fee of 40, then it's kind of worth it. I like to still cut it down to about 30, 35. But if I can get the most out of my life and live a fulfilling life with 70%, 65% of my time, and the cost that costs me for my life, not for like a car, not for like a home, or not for like a management deal where it's like, oh, that percentage is too high. This is literally what's managing my life. Like, this is what's keeping me healthy, keeping me sane, keeping me able to do the best or the worst. So if I got to give you 30, 35%, 40, okay, 40 is negotiable, but 35, you got it, strong, solid. You know, so just consider that. If you're average 7, 8 hours of sleep, you're doing 40%. Anything over 8, you might be a little greedy, but either way, you're doing more percentages. So just take that into perspective, right? A couple of episodes ago, this is earlier in the season, I had mentioned a statement along the lines of why Google never crashes, right? So, and I can't remember exactly verbatim, so I'm going to try to paraphrase this, but the designers that they had basically said before Google was designed, this system is going to fail. I'm going to show you how. Versus somebody else that might have said, this system is going to fail, or this system is going to crash. It's useless. And this is how we look at certain things in life. Like we even look at people this way. That person has a flaw. They're useless to me. That person did something to me. They have a flaw. They did something to me. They're useless to me. Let's stay on topic though. So the reason why Google doesn't crash, this designer, they came and this is the mentality that they had. They didn't have the mentality where it's like, this is going to crash eventually. There's nothing we can do. Or this is going to crash eventually. It's not a good product. They said, this is going to crash eventually. Let us show you how. So what happens with that let us show you how mentality is now you can implement safeguards in place to ensure that if it crashes, we're back up as soon as possible. And then you can also, even more importantly, you can safeguard to lower the amount of chances for and risk for crashing to take place, right? So since those things are put into place, Google rarely crashes. I heard they had some Gmail issue a couple months ago, and I think over their time in existence, I think they've had maybe 2-3 times where they crash, but even their crashes are considered like a second to 2 seconds to 5 seconds tops. But where this relates to sleep is because our manufacturer said, you're going to crash. Let me show you how. Or better yet, you're going to crash. Let me tell you how. Either one. So that crashing is when our system overloads, when we're tired, when we're worn out, when we're beaten up, and we need rest. So he says, your system's going to crash. That's how I designed it. I know it's going to crash because I designed it. I know it's going to crash because I know what its limitations are. I know it's going to crash because I know what its strengths are. I know what its weaknesses are. I know your system is going to crash. Let me show you the safeguards that I put in place for that. Because I gave you rest. I gave you sleep. God forbid if I didn't give you the Sabbath. But I gave you rest. I gave you sleep. Those are your safeguards that are in place to prevent you from crashing. Not to mention the things that we put into our system that may contribute to crashing, which is almost like downloading software to a computer and just hoping that you don't get a virus. Whole nother conversation. So sleep is important. Sleep is written into our genetic code. It's written into our code. It's a reason why. It's a reason to prevent crashing, and it's a reason to restore us upon crashing. Sleep is important. The next one is thinking. So steps to remember. The second one is thinking. Critical. Thinking is one of those things that is underrated by most, but used by everybody. Everybody thinks. Some people just think about trash, but everybody does it. It's like the cool thing to do. Everybody's doing it. Everybody has to think. But it's not what you think about that's important. It's how you think about it. The way that we think can impact the way that we navigate life. For instance, the concept of not having enough, right? There are people in this world who feel like they have to have more and have more and have more because they feel like there's not enough. Then there are people who get more, give more because there's always enough. And then there's people who are just content because they have a full understanding of theirs is theirs, yours is yours, and truthfully, there is enough for everybody. Which I am a firm believer that there is enough for everybody. And truthfully, if everybody even shared, I'm not saying that you are, I'm not trying to practice a socialist society, but I'm saying that even if it were divided amongst every single person on the face of the earth, I'm more than likely sure you would have enough resources to cover everybody at least twice. Just taking a wild guess, but I know you can cover them at least once. Well, what that goes to say is that there's more than enough. So your perspective, the way you think, learning to think. Thinking is not something that just comes to you as a full-suited muscle. It's not something that just comes to you ready and perfect to go for the rest of your life. Like it doesn't need any maintaining, no upgrades, no nothing like that. The brain is something that needs to be exercised. It is a muscle. It is something that can be improved, should be improved, and could be improved if we apply the work that's required to do so. Another thing about it is that perception that we might have on life. Because perception is everything, whether you're an optimist, whether you're pessimistic, whether you have that have to or that get to attitude, or whether you look at a situation as an opportunity, or whether you look at every situation as a problem. And the way that you approach and the way that you look at those situations not only says a lot about yourself, but it also says a lot about the way that you navigate life and how you'll navigate life and what you're navigating through. That thinking is so important. Here's a way to improve, right? Once again, asking questions. Even faith requires thought and research. The dead are the days where we used to have our old heads. You know, your big mamas at the church, or, you know, the older deacons or the pastors when I was growing up, or things like that. They would tell you, you know, have faith. And on top of have faith, if you ask a question, you probably shouldn't be asking that question. You just need to have faith. There's no room for questions. And it's an idiotic concept because even faith requires thought. Like that thought, that doubt, that curiosity is literally the foundation of understanding. So even when it comes to faith, it requires thought. And that thought requires research. It requires knowledge. It requires doing some homework yourself. Don't just take somebody else's thoughts for it. Don't just take somebody else's idea for it. And that's what a lot of us do. That's what the country is being built on. That's why you have so much propaganda that's being fed through the news. That's why you have so much money that's being spent on marketing in order to shift and shape your ideas into what the desired product wants out of you. So for you, it really comes down to how are you thinking, what are you thinking about, and how did you come to those conclusions? And are you learning to think? Are you doing more to exercise your thinking muscles? The E is very simple. The E is for eat. Silly. You knew that. You could have guessed that. It's what you eat. And with this one, I'm going to say back a little bit on this one here because I've really been working on a book that's due to come out soon. And it dives into this and so much more. But I'm not going to leave you in the dark. But that eating is not just a physical digestion system. You know, what we eat, what you eat is both mentally, it's physically, and they both are required in order to take a step. Like the sleeping thing is one thing, but if you're malnourished, if you don't have the nutrients required in order to fuel the muscles, joints, and the different body parts in order to move, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not even going to get a mile. So you can forget about the 1,000 miles that starts with a step. You're not even going to get a mile if you do not have the nourishment it needs and is required in order to make those steps. Ultimately, what you're thinking. What are you consuming mentally? What are you consuming spiritually, emotionally? What emotions are being digested in some of the ingredients in this life that you surround yourself? Are the surroundings that you're in, are they leaking depression, fear on you? Are they leaking procrastination on you? Are those secret ingredients that are in their food? Because even in the meal prep episode, which I highly recommend you watch, that one's all about being able to make sure that you're packaging your food before you leave the house. Are you equipped with enough faith before you leave? Are you equipped with enough grace, peace, patience before you go out into the world and are offered meals from everything around you that you have no idea what's in the food that you're consuming? The next one is physical. And nope, I'm sorry. It's past. The next step is past. So you have to be mindful of, give me a sec here, y'all. So you have to be mindful of your sleeping patterns. You have to be mindful of your thoughts. You have to be mindful of what you're eating. And you also have to be mindful of your past. All right. So, this past is a loaded one. The past is a loaded one. So, how can I like to put scenarios in place to kind of help you get an idea of some of these things, right? So, it's 3 types of drivers. Let's say it's 3 drivers on the road, right? 3 drivers on the freeway. And I'm sure you are the one, or you have been the one who has been driving too fast and needed to go around, or you have been the person who has been driving too slow. I'm not even going to say which one I am and which one I do more of, but let's just safely say I have done both. One a lot more than the other. But anyways, so there's the person who will, if you're driving, let's assume that you're the slow person. So there's 3 type of people. There's a type of person that when they see a car speeding up behind them, they're going to speed up. Then there's the type of person who, when they see somebody speeding up behind them, they're going to get out of the way. I'm going to switch lanes on you. Go ahead, you can have it. And then there are the people who, when they see a car speed up on their bumper, they're just going to stay right there. I ain't moving. If you want to go around, you can go around. There's 3 different types of drivers out there. The past approaches us just like that fast driver on the bumper of each one of those cars. So, how are you handling it? When the past comes up to greet you again, are you the type of person who speeds up? Are you trying to outspeed your past? Are you not really even trying to pay attention or acknowledge the fact that it is behind you, and as you're speeding up, it's literally trying to catch up with you? Because that can have some problematicness to it. Because now you're speeding. And the reason why you're speeding is because you got something on your tail. It's not just the simple fact of speeding. You're speeding because you got something on your tail that, for one, you don't want to catch up with you, or you don't want to move out of the way for. Secondly, you have the person, oh, gotta love them, bless their heart. If the car is speeding up, they're just going to let it ride that bumper. And this is the type of person where it's like the past is on their bumper. You know it's on there. You know the past is riding your coattails. It's bugging you. It's bothering you. It's in your ear. It's probably impacting some decisions that you made. But you know what? You're just not going to let it go. You're just not going to let it go. You're going to hang on. You say, I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to walk my walk. I'm going to do my journey. And that past, it just is what it is. And it's just going to... It's slowing you down because you won't move out of the lane. It's slowing you down because you said, I deserve to be right where I am right now. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to deal with this person behind me. I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. But if your past is on you that aggressively, it needs to be addressed. And something needs to be done. And then you have the people who, when they see a car speeding up behind them, they're going to move out of the way. I'm going to get in the next lane. If you're in such a hurry, you go right ahead. You can go ahead and pass me up. I got nowhere to be. I'm in no hurry. It's all yours. And sometimes we have to do that with the experiences in our past. You have to look up in that rearview mirror, see us flying up on you, and okay, cool. Go ahead, fear. You can go ahead and pass. That situation that happened to me 10, 15 years ago, go ahead. You can go ahead and pass. Because you've been riding my bumper for quite some time. You've been tailing me for a while. You've been tailing me for years. I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead and pass. You can go ahead. Let me go ahead and get about your way. And let you go ahead and pass. The past is important to be dealt with, and I heard a couple people say it. But in a nutshell, there's a specific reason why your front window is bigger than your rearview mirror. And it's because it requires more focus. It requires more attention. And if your entire time is spent looking into the rear view or dealing with the car that's behind you, you're eventually going to make a mistake on the road that's in front of you. It's inevitable. If you're more focused on what's behind you, it's inevitable that something happens on the road ahead of you that you weren't attentive to. It's interesting. It's like, for example, let's say your friend asks you to take a ride with him, right? And you're riding around, and all of a sudden you hear this boom, 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 boom. You hear boom, boom, boom in the trunk, right? But you don't pay nothing of it. Your buddy who's driving, he turns the music up a little bit louder. And you keep driving, and you hear it louder, and you're like, boom, 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 boom. And it gets louder, it's like, what is that? And he looks over at you, or she looks over at you, and just, I don't know, and goes back to keep driving. I'm like, okay, you got this weird look on your face, like, what is going on? I know I'm not crazy, am I? Boom, 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 boom. Then you hear it again. It's like, wait a minute, hey, what is that noise? What is that? They look over at you and say, it's a body in the trunk. What do you mean it's a body in your trunk? It's a body in the trunk. A body in your trunk? It's a body in the trunk. Is it still yes, it's listen, it's a body. It's not completely dead. I was planning on just riding around with it and getting rid of it later when I had some time. I was just going to deal with it later. I don't want to kill him. I'm just going to bury it alive later. That's pretty much what I was just thinking. I just didn't want to kill it all the way. I was just going to try to bury it alive and, hope for the best. And when it comes to dealing with stuff from our past, we're riding around with the trunk banging. And it ain't no speakers back there either. It's a body in the trunk. you got past trauma, you got past fears, you got past anxiety. They just beating in the trunk, and you're riding around with them saying, I don't want to kill it. I don't want to deal with it. I was just riding around till I got to a good place where I could bury it alive. And unfortunately, those type of things that we attempt to bury alive are a little bit stronger, and they're not going to, first of all, get out of the trunk without a fight, aka your head. They're not going to get out of your head without a fight. They're not going to get out of your past without a fight. And then for you attempt to bury them alive, which is trying to get rid of them without dealing with how they have impacted you, you got a hell of a fight on your hands. And a lot of times we try to bury things that we haven't completely dealt with. So they're just kicking around. They're just like a body in the trunk that's just fighting for survival, and we refuse to put it out of our memory. And then when we get around other people that can sense that there's something going on or something problematic, we either disregard it or we say, yeah, it's just who I am. That's the answer for that. That's just who I am. I'll deal with it eventually. The second P is for people. Perhaps one of the most important ones and probably one of the most tricky ones, because here's the thing. You need sleep. You need food. But another one of the things that we don't really pay too much attention to, but it is an essential need of humans, is social interaction. We need that. So not only is it something that we need and that we require, and then also something that we want and we crave, it's also something that can come attached with a double-edged sword. Because we can put ourselves around the wrong people that will put us into the wrong situations, that will have us growing into the wrong things. Because the thing about it is, you're always growing. The question is, what is it that you're growing into? People challenge us, and we need people that challenge us. People that don't challenge us in good ways, it doesn't allow us to grow. That challenge, consider it to be like the sun beating down on a plant or on a rose when it's still in its seedling days and still trying to grow. That hot sun beating down on that flower, on that plant, is what helps it to grow. And then you might have another friend who might be a little more cold with it, but they're still honest and transparent. They mean well. Their delivery might just be a little more colder to you because it's not something that you're used to. Something like that might be the rain that you need in order to grow. But God puts different things in our paths and into our lives to help cultivate growth. Sometimes we completely surround ourselves with things that don't allow us to grow. But the challenge is to put people in our lives that foster that growth, to help us to grow, and not only to help sharpen that iron, help us to grow, but to also help us to sharpen that iron. Because the thing about iron sharpening iron is that, yes, it sharpens iron, and yes, you do become sharper in what it is that you're challenging each other at, but that iron can also be used as a double-edged sword to cut yourself if it's something that is unhealthy to your growth. People that you're comfortable being yourself around. That's what you need. People that allow you to embrace who you are while not being afraid to call you out on your mess. Those are the type of people that we have to fill our lives with. And I don't think that comes without some trial and error. And I also think that comes with nothing but roses and joy and happy relationships. Because I think even through the negative experiences, negative friends, negative encounters that we have, there's still learning lessons on what we want, don't want, and how to better sharpen ourselves and how to become more effective in who we are as a person. So the journey of 1,000,000 steps begins with one step, but it requires steps. S.T.E.P.P. It requires that attention to the sleep that you're getting. It requires that attention to your thoughts and learning to think. It requires being cognizant of what you're eating, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It deals with being mindful of the past as you're pursuing those steps. And lastly, it involves the right people. Making sure that you have the right people around you in order to help you get to the right places. Because these things together are what help us to get to that millionth mile. Because without those things, we won't make it to the millionth step. So, homework assignment for today, y'all. I want you to do a step analysis. Jot down some ways that you can improve each highlight. Let me rephrase that. Jot down some ways that you can improve each area of the step. How can you improve your sleep? How can you improve your thoughts? How can you improve your eating habits? Your dealing with your past, the people that you're surrounding yourself with. What are the weaknesses? What are the strengths? What are the areas of opportunities? I'm going to provide a worksheet too that'll kind of help you to work through it too. It'll be available on the website, and then also a link in here, qualityservice.com, and then also you can be able to get the link. I'll make sure I put it in the YouTube video for you too, right? But that's the homework assignment. Just make sure that you do the step analysis, because the step analysis will help you to be able to continue to step in the name of passion, in the name of what you're pursuing, and in the name of purpose. So go ahead and subscribe if you like what you heard. That way you can stay in tune with when the new podcasts come out and when any other inspiration, motivation, and empowerment is available. And then also, if you know anyone who needs inspiration and empowerment, tell them to text 31996 to motivate me. Rewind that, text motivate me to 31996. They'll be added on there. And until the next time, I'm your host for the day, and your host always, Sir Evans. Stay blessed. Have a great day, y'all. I'm Sir Evans, and you've been listening to Surreal Life Morning Motivation. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. Feel free to subscribe, rate, and review this episode. And join me next week for Surreal Life Morning Motivation. Thank you for listening. Salute.